Good evening, everybody. Bible study students. Welcome to Wednesday Bible study tonight, part 3 from Levi to Levites. You might learn a new word tonight. I hope you do. Well, we've been studying about this guy. Levi and his brother Simeon deceived and massacred all the men in the town of Shechem after their sister Dinah was raped there. Levi's retribution was excessive. It was violent. It was cruel. He went beyond the point of justice, and he got into the stage of vengeful slaughter. Archaeological evidence suggests that cities in this area during this time had thousands of people in the population. So it was probably hundreds of men that Levi and his older brother Simeon killed that day. They did it all in one day in the city of Shechem. Jacob had seemingly cursed Levi and Simeon for what they did. Here's the curse. This is Jacob when he's dying. This is their father, Jacob, renamed to Israel. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are implements of violence. May my soul not enter into their counsel. May my glory not be united with their assembly. For in their anger they killed men, and in their self-will they lamed oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them among Israel. Now he's saying, I will, but I believe here he's speaking for the Lord in prophecy, because of course Jacob is dying. He's not going to scatter them, but he's prophesying, or he's under the control of the Spirit of the Lord, and he's speaking as if he were the Lord, saying that they're going to be scattered in Jacob and dispersed throughout Israel. Jacob's curse foretold that these tribes would not have a unified inheritance in the promised land, but that they would be dispersed. And the curse on these two sons, though, turned out very differently. Simeon, and you might see that on your map tonight. Do you see Simeon down at the bottom left? Simeon is completely surrounded by who? Judah. They were the only tribe that had no way in and out except going through another tribe. So they were completely surrounded by the tribe of Judah. That was odd. But what happened was they eventually lost their identity, and later on there was no more tribe of Simeon. They basically just got absorbed into the tribe of Judah. But what about Levi and his tribe, his children? At Mount Sinai, the Lord reversed the curse on Levi because his great-grandchildren stood with Moses against the golden calf and the idolaters there when Moses came down from the mountain with the written 10 commandments. As a result, God chose the Levites to replace the firstborn sons in every family as his representatives to the nation. So the Levites became the teachers of the law and the leaders of worship, and they were also the Lord's eyes and ears scattered throughout all the other tribes. And it worked out beautifully for them. Again, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Now behold, I have taken the Levites from among the sons of Israel, instead of every firstborn. The firstborn of the womb among the sons of men, the Levites shall be mine. And here they are playing a nice little number, maybe a cantata, something like that. I don't know. Maybe the singers are off camera here, or maybe this is just a music practice. But there's the Levites right there, looking real sharp, wouldn't you say? Real sharp. So they became teachers of the law, and they became also the workers in the tabernacle. But what about Jacob's prophecy that Levi would be scattered? The Lord had decreed over and over, we read it last week, that the Levites were not to have any land inheritance in the promised land. So where are the Levites going to live? Class? in the cities of the Levites. Was that too easy? They're going to live in the cities of the Levites. So they're going to get cities from all the other tribes. So they're going to be living alongside each tribe, and they're going to be sharing these particular Levite cities with whichever people that city is located in. So you see the 12 tribes there. So wherever the city was located, those people would be in the Levite cities as well as the Levites. So we're going to talk about that tonight.
Was there a temple in each of the tribes or not? How many temples?
No, one temple. One temple. And we're kind of getting to that in Sunday school, because now that Joshua's covered the land, conquered the land. I knew it was a C word. Conquered the land. They're going to be moving the tabernacle around to several places. That's a good question. Larry always asks the best questions. He's keeping up. So there's the tabernacle is going to be moved around into several locations, and we'll be covering that in the adult Bible class on Sunday mornings going forward. But eventually, when David comes, he's going to gather the materials, and his son Solomon will build the one and only temple in Jerusalem. But that's a little bit ahead. So the Levites were also given limited pasture area around the perimeter of these cities where they could raise crops and raise animals, but they also depended on the tithes for their sustenance. The Levites also became the Lord's law enforcement agents as they were looking out for early signs of idolatry so that they could crush idolatry before it took a foothold, before it got going, before it took one of the tribes down the wrong road. So the Levites were also the Lord's hands and feet and eyes, you might think of it that way. So in the study tonight, we're going to talk about the Levite cities. You may have heard them called the Levitical cities. And we're going to talk about a subgroup of these cities called the cities of refuge. Have you heard of them? Well, you're going to learn about them tonight, maybe more than you ever knew. Maybe. I can't say that for sure. And then comes our new word. I'm going to give it to you now. We'll see it in a little while. The Goel. The Goel. Rhymes with Joel. It's a Hebrew word, but in English we would spell it something like Goel, the Goel. So just hang on to that. We're going to get to the Goel before we're done tonight. All right? So we're going to start in the book of Exodus because that's a good place. And there's a good pop question for you. Where are the 10 commandments in the book of Exodus? The 10 are in 20. Ding, 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 ding. Listen to those points just racking up over there. The 10 are in 20, so this is the next chapter, and it actually continues from 20 to 21. So this is going to be the Lord speaking to Moses after he gave him the 10 commandments. Moses is still up on the mountain, Mount Sinai. He's on his 5th trip up there. He has not come down yet. He hasn't seen the golden calf yet. The Levites haven't stood with Moses against the golden calf yet, but he's up there, and the Lord is going to give him some supplemental rules that go along with the 10 commandments. In fact, I think it's 3 chapters worth of supplemental rules. And we talked about, Larry had asked a good question about where are the laws all in here? And the answer is the laws are scattered throughout Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. It's like Moses just gives them out randomly sometimes. They're in logical groups, like he didn't just come out with one at a time. But the laws really are scattered out through these 4 books of Moses. So here we go. We're going to start with the death penalty because it has a lot to do with the Levitical cities and the cities of refuge. Ready, Jackie? Here we go.
He who strikes someone so that he dies shall certainly be put to death.
Wow. Well, there's no equivocation about that, right? But what if it was an accident? Right? Raising my 6 children, co-raising my 6 children, let's say it like that. I learned that you can never make enough rules to control people. There's always going to be an exception. They're always going to come up with what about this? What about this? So now we're going to have to qualify this because certainly accidental deaths do occur. So how's that going to be handled? This is the Lord speaking to Moses to give to the people these supplemental laws that go with the 10 Commandments. Okay?
Yet if he did not lie in wait for him, but God caused him to fall into his hand, then I will appoint you a place to which he may flee.
Okay, now he kind of drops this topic and comes back to it in the book of Numbers. It's not really explained here, but the Lord's saying, if this does happen, I'm going to give you a place that the accidental murderer can flee to. So that's what that is hinting at, but he doesn't really discuss it right here. And then if,
however, someone is enraged against his neighbor, so as to kill him in a cunning way, you are to take him even from my altar to be put to death.
Now, we don't really have a place in the Bible where it says that they could flee to the altar, but we do have a couple of examples in the Bible, in the Old Testament, of people that had killed and they went into the tabernacle and they went to that altar because the altar of sacrifice was in the outer court. Everybody could access it. Well, everybody that was a Jew could access it. And this particular guy ran up and grabbed onto the horns of the altar. And I think there was another incident with Solomon where a man had grabbed onto the horns of the altar. But neither one of those were accidental murders. So it wound up that they were killed anyway because they were not going to this place that he was supposed to flee to. There was no law that they could go to the altar. It was people just trying to somehow get out of the murder that they had committed. But the Lord says, even if they go to the altar, if they're clinging to the altar, they still have to be put to death. So let's read a little bit more about this death penalty thing. Now here the Lord is going to give equivalent and limited punishment. There can never be equal punishment because every one of us is different. And if I cut off your arm and then you cut off my arm, that's equivalent, but it's not the same because we each use our arms differently. And it doesn't come out fairly like that. You might think it does, but we're going to get to a thing here where the Lord talks about this equivalence of punishment between two people. So you can never make it exactly even. Either you're going to overpunish that person that you try to punish for what they did to you, or you're going to underpunish them, but you can never exactly affect them like they affected you because we're all different and we all have different thoughts and values and ways of living our lives. So it can never be an exact one-for-one equal. But the Lord's going to give them this plan and it's going to be as close to fair as you can get. All right? Now
if people struggle with each other and strike a pregnant woman so that she gives birth prematurely, but there is no injury, the guilty person shall certainly be fined, as the woman's husband may demand of him, and he shall pay as the judges decide.
Interesting. The husband gets to say, this is what I want in repayment, but then the judge has to okay it. The judge has to say, yeah, that's fair or that's not fair. But if there's any further injury, then you shall appoint as a penalty life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. All right, this is where we get the phrase an eye for an eye. Jesus quoted it in Matthew, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. It's supposed to be the most equal form of retribution, but it also limited the punishment because as humans, when we're angry and somebody has hurt us, we tend to overdo the payback. We tend to overdo the payback. And this is the Lord limiting it. It's not like you take out my eye, I'll take out both of your eyes. The Lord said, you can't do that. It's got to be one eye for one eye, one tooth for one tooth. So here the Lord is limiting this punishment. Now, what does that have to do about the Levites? Well, we're getting to it. Now we've skipped over into Numbers 35. We just had to cover that thing about murder and eye for an eye because it's going to come into play here with the cities of the Levites. So the Levites are to receive cities from the tribes of Israel. This is where It's all laid out. This is Moses and the Lord speaking to him.
Now the Lord spoke to Moses in the plains of Moab, by the Jordan, opposite Jericho.
So that's
saying,
right before they went into the promised land to take it. Not the time they sent the spies and changed their mind, but this is when they really go in. Okay?
Command the sons of Israel that they give to the Levites from the inheritance of their possession cities to live in. And you shall give to the Levites pasture lands around the cities. The cities shall be theirs to live in, and their pasture lands shall be for their cattle, and for their equipment, and for all their other animals.
Okay, so that sounds pretty straightforward. We got that. And here's a little bit more about those pasture lands.
The pasture lands of the cities which you are to give to the Levites shall extend from the wall of the city outward 1,000 cubits around.
I'm not sure what that green 2 is. That's a mistake in there. The editor missed that one. Okay, so they get 1,000 cubits. That's about 1,500 feet. So that's a little over a quarter mile from the wall of the city. Now, remember, these cities that they're talking about, these are the cities that are in the promised land that they're going to take. They're going to take them from the idolaters, the Canaanites, and they're just going to move in. They're going to bring their stuff in. The Lord said you're going to get cities that you didn't have to build. And so that's the cities that we're talking about. They're going to move into these cities, and they're going to give the first 1,500 feet approximately to the Levites, and then...
You shall also measure outside the city on the east side 2,000 cubits, on the south side 2,000 cubits, on the west side 2,000 cubits, and on the north side 2,000 cubits, with a city in the center. This shall become theirs as pasture lands for the cities.
So that's for the cities. That's for the whatever tribe they're in. If they're in the tribe of Judah, there's Levites in there in those Levitical cities, but there's also Jews from Judah. That's our next lesson next Wednesday, from Judah to Jews. So there's also going to be Jews in that city because they're in the tribe of Judah. So they'll be sharing the city with the Levites, and they're going to have the outer ring, so to speak. It's not a ring, it's a square, but I don't know if it's a square.
This is in all the, not just Judah.
All the Levitical cities. The Levites get the inner pasture lands, and then the people whose tribe they are in gets the outer band around that city for their pasture lands, which, because it's further out, it's bigger, it contains more area. All right, so the Levites now are to receive 6 cities of refuge from all the tribes of Israel. So this is that place, it's the same color, where the Lord said, I'll give you places to flee. That's what this is right here. So this is the Lord talking to Moses of how to set these cities up.
The cities which you shall give to the Levites shall be the 6 cities of refuge, which you shall provide for the ones who commit manslaughter to flee to, and in addition to them you shall give 42 cities.
All right, Bible math, 42 plus 6. 48. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Joy. Joy, I heard Joy first. Points to Joy. You get points too, babe. She hates losing. Even to Joy. She just hates losing. You didn't lose.
You need to stop talking about me tonight.
Jackie comforted me and made me feel better today. So
And this is what I get for being nice.
I'm especially endearing of her tonight. She's going to make me some broth when we get home.
I think you're getting the couch tonight.
Keep going, please.
The total number of the cities which you are to give to the
here it
Levites
is.
shall be 48 cities,
Okay.
together with their pasture lands.
All right, so they've got 48 cities and the pasture land around it. Okay.
As for the cities which you shall give them from the possession of the sons of Israel, you shall take more from the larger, and you shall take fewer from the smaller.
Makes sense.
Each shall give some of his cities to the Levites in proportion to his inheritance which he possesses.
Okay. What do you think about this? There's 6 cities of refuge. Why didn't the Lord give them 7? Because that's God's perfect number, right? Well, what is the 6?
Number of man.
That's the number. We think that that's the number. Bible scholars think that that's the number of man because it's less than the Lord's number 7. And of course, we know that the man of sin is defined by his number 666, which is 6 to the ultimate degree. And so these 6 cities, the Lord has given these 6 cities so that they can work out their human conflicts between each other, so that they can have some rules. And this is how we're going to work out disputes, because there are going to be disputes. It's going to be a whole different existence living in the promised land than it was walking around the desert. They were nomadic for many years, but now they're going to be settled. Now they're going to have schools to send their kids to, right? Now they're going to have jobs to work in. It's going to be a whole different existence. So the Lord is setting up these rules that fit for a settled community. All right, so 6 of those cities. And, there we go.
Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, When you cross the Jordan into the land of Canaan, then you shall select for yourselves cities to be your cities of refuge, so that the one who commits manslaughter by killing a person unintentionally may flee there.
Okay, that's the manslayer. Accidental killing of another person. The cities?
The city shall serve you as a refuge from the avenger.
Who?
The avenger.
Who's that?
The one that was done wrong.
We're going to have to explore that a little bit more, but he didn't say right there who's the avenger. He just threw that out there. First time it's been mentioned. But we're going to figure it out. Don't worry. Stay with us. Don't leave.
So that the one who commits manslaughter does not die until he stands before the congregation for trial.
All right, so before the avenger can get to him, he's got to have a trial. He's got to let other people judge to see if he's really worthy of being killed for the accidental murder, or maybe what he said was accidental. But sometimes people lie. Yeah, especially about murder, right? So maybe he said it was an accident, but we need to review the facts. And so the Lord is setting up a system for that to occur in Israel. All right, so now he's going to say any manslayer in the land can flee, even if they're not part of Israel, even if they're strangers, even if they're sojourners, people passing through the land. These cities of refuge are for anybody within the boundaries of Israel.
So the cities which you are to provide shall be 6 cities of refuge for you. You shall provide 3 cities across the Jordan and 3 cities in the land of Canaan. They are to be cities of refuge.
Now, we haven't covered this in Sunday school, but we need to just mention it. If you look at your map right there, you see the Jordan River coming down from the Sea of Galilee and emptying into the Dead Sea. So on the right side, which is the east side, those of you that have problems with east and west, let me give you a little mnemonic. Think of the word we. And in we, where's the W? Which side? The left side. That's the west side. E is on the right side. That's the east side. So if you look at your map, and now everybody knows where the east side is. Michael, could you please give Mike a map too so he can have his own? Thank you, Kay. So this is the first time we've mentioned the fact that there's going to be 3 sides on the east, 3 tribes on the east side. How about that? That's not technically the land of Canaan, is it? No, it's not. Canaan is on the west side of the Jordan. But what happened was, just to kind of give you the story in a brief few sentences, before they went into the land of Canaan, Reuben and Gad and Manasseh came up to Moses and said, hey, we like it over here. Why can't we just have our free land on this side? And Moses said, fine with me. The only stipulation is you've got to go across Jordan with us and fight with the other 9 tribes to subdue the land. You've got to come help us, and then once we get the Canaanites out of the land, you can come back across and you can have your 3 tribes on the right side or the east side of the Jordan River. So that's what these 3 cities across Jordan and 3 cities in the land of Canaan are talking about. These 6 cities...
These 6 cities shall be a refuge for the sons of Israel, for the stranger, and for the foreign resident among them, so that anyone who kills a person unintentionally may flee there.
Remember when they left Egypt, they went out with a mixed multitude? You remember that? That's all kinds of people that were not Hebrews. And here the Lord, even though they're not part of Jacob's family, the Lord is making provisions for those people. Presumably, some of them that left Egypt made it, or their children made it into the promised land, but they were not Hebrews. They were not from Jacob. but they're living here, and they were traveling among Israel, and now they're going to be living among Israel in the promised land. And so the Lord is making provisions for anybody that lives in the land of Israel, that they can have this protection from the avenger. Right? Okay. Now, he's going to say this over and over again. The murderer must be put to death. All right?
But if he struck him with an iron object so that he died, he is a murderer. The murderer must be put to death.
This is the Lord speaking.
And if he struck him with a stone in the hand, by which he would die, and as a result he did die, he is a murderer. The murderer must be put to death.
Okay, and?
Or if he struck him with a wooden object in the hand, by which he would die, and as a result he did die, he is a murderer. The murderer must be put to death.
All right, so if they killed him with an object, wood, stone, iron, it was obviously premeditated. They were trying to kill the man or trying to wound him. Maybe not trying to kill him, but they had the preparation to pick up an instrument of death and to use it against that person. In all three cases, he said that's murder, and we have to put that person to death. But who is going to put the murderer to death? We're going to have murderers killing murderers? How's that going to work? Well, he tells us right here.
The blood avenger.
The blood avenger. Now, we still don't know who that is, but it's coming up. Blood avenger.
Himself shall put the murderer to death. He himself shall put him to death when he meets him.
He doesn't have to say, hey, how you doing? As soon as he finds him, he can kill him. This blood avenger. So who is this blood avenger? Oh, that's what I just said. Who is this blood avenger? All right, here we go. The avenger in Numbers comes from the Hebrew word goel. Remember that one? That's our new word for tonight. It's the avenger. It's the goel. But in most places that we see this, or many places that we see this word in the Old Testament, he's not called the blood avenger. He's just called the goel. So as it turns out, the goel has two different functions. The word goel has a close association with redeeming or buying back or exchanging something. And the goel is a near kinsman, ideally the next of kin. It would be a male next of kin. And the goel in this circumstance is known as the kinsman redeemer. Have you heard of that? The kinsman redeemer. He's responsible for buying back family property and restoring the family inheritance, because all of the tribes are given specific land and they're never supposed to change their borders. The Lord said, don't change the borders. Every family gets what they had in the beginning, and we're going to keep it that way. But what happens if you have to sell your property? What happens if you get in debt? Well, the goel, the kinsman redeemer in your family, next of kin, hopefully male, is responsible for buying that property. Now, he doesn't have to give it back to you. It's his. But he's keeping it in the family. Keeping it in the family. Also, the goel is responsible for buying back a family member from slavery. Have you ever been in debt slavery? I have. Multiple times. Multiple times. It's not the same as regular slavery, but it is a form of slavery. If you have somebody that has a claim on your check every time you make that check and it goes in the bank, but you don't get it all because somebody else is going to get it. It belongs to somebody else. And sometimes people had to go into debt and would sell themselves to pay off their debts. And now the Lord had specific instructions. You can't mistreat your slave, but they can work for you and they can pay off their debt. And so if there was a goel, he was responsible for buying back family members from slavery. And then the third thing, marrying a widow to procreate children for the deceased husband. And that is exactly what the story of Ruth and Boaz, the goel, the kinsman redeemer, is about. And why are they in blood red? Because they are the great, I don't know how many great grandparents of the Messiah. And one of them was a Goel named Boaz. So that's coming up in adult Bible class, I think this quarter. I think we're going to do Judges and Ruth this quarter. So you can't quit yet. You've got to keep coming. All right. But there's another form of this word Goel, and it's the blood avenger, and it's Goel Haddam. Been waiting to say that all day. It's actually Haddam, probably, in Hebrew, but I just thought I'd get a little Christian cursing in there, huh? That's not cursing. Goel Haddam, and it is the avenger of blood. That's what we read earlier. The avenger of blood. The blood avenger. What is his job? The Goel Haddam is a kinsman avenger. Not the kinsman redeemer, but the kinsman avenger. And he is responsible for avenging the unlawful killing of a family member. And so that's what Moses and the Lord are talking about in this context of the book of Numbers. Now, you've learned all of that. You know what the Goel is. And now we're going to go back to the narrative in the book of Numbers. The murderer must be put to death by the Goel Haddam, the blood avenger.
Now if he pushed him in hatred, or he threw something at him with malicious intent, and as a result he died, or if he struck him with his hand with hostility, and as a result he died, the one who struck him must be put to death. He is a murderer.
This is why we are told to control our emotions as Christians. Look at these emotions: hatred, malicious intent, hostility. It can end in murder. But the Lord says, these are not the fruits of the Spirit. These are not the fruits of the Spirit. So that's why we try to control those and not even have them in our life as much as possible. All right, so he must be put to death because he's a murderer.
The blood avenger shall put the murderer to death when he meets him.
Whenever he finds him, the blood avenger is free and clear to murder the murderer. Well, how's that fair? Now, who's going to murder the murderer? It's like an unending chain, right? You're right, Phil Barker. In fact, the Lord, we're going to see it coming up. Not this slide, but it's coming up. Don't leave. It's coming up. But right here, the Lord is going to put a time limit on the manslaughter punishment. Remember, manslaughter is accidental murder. Okay? And what are you going to do if you commit accidental murder? You're going to go where? To one of the cities of refuge, okay? All right, let's see how that works.
But if he pushed him suddenly without hostility, or threw any object at him without malicious intent, or had any deadly stone, and without looking he dropped it on him so that he died, while he was not his enemy, nor was he seeking to harm him, then the congregation shall judge between the one who fatally struck the victim and the blood avenger in accordance with these ordinances. All right,
so they're going to have a trial. The congregation gets to vote, presumably on, was it intentional? Or are we going to turn the blood avenger loose on him? Okay? And the congregation?
And the congregation shall save the one who committed manslaughter from the hand of the blood avenger. And the congregation shall return him to his city of refuge to which he fled. And he shall live in it until the death of the high priest who was anointed with the holy oil.
So if you accidentally killed someone, you better get on your horse and ride to the nearest city of refuge. And how long do you have to stay there? Until the high priest dies. Wow. What if you die before him? You can never leave, right? If you leave the city of refuge, you are liable to be killed by the Goel. The Goel can kill you if you leave the city of refuge. You got to stay. You can't even go outside and check on your crops and your animals. You've got to stay within the city. Don't you know that there were some blood avengers that were hiding near the gate, waiting for that jerk to come out? I'm going to get him. I'm going to club him. I'm going to beat his brains out for what he did. And maybe it happened. We don't have any stories about that. We do have a story in the Bible. It was during the days of David, where a soldier that was one of Saul's soldiers fled to a city of refuge because he was afraid when David took the throne But that wasn't the right situation. He was in an army. It wasn't an accidental murder, but he tried to go hide in the city of refuge, and the blood avenger tricked him. We're not going to cover it tonight because it's really not a good example of this, but he tried to hide in the city of refuge. The blood avenger tricked him, brought him out of the city, and then he killed him right there. And he was completely free to do that because the one that had committed, actually the soldier, was not covered even if he was in the city of refuge. Soldiers were not covered by the city of refuge. It was only for accidental manslaughter. Okay, so a minute ago we said, but what about this Goel? If he kills, isn't he guilty of murder too? Well, not in the eyes of the Lord. The blood avenger, the Lord's going to say, is not guilty of bloodshed. All right?
But if at any time he goes beyond the border of his city of refuge to which he flees, and the blood avenger finds him outside the border of his city of refuge, and the blood avenger kills him, he will not be guilty of bloodshed.
He's not guilty. The blood avenger is not guilty because that guy should have stayed in there. There it is.
Because he should have remained in his city of refuge until the death of the high priest.
But he just couldn't wait, right? He had something really important he had to go check on. So this thing about the death of the high priest kind of sounds like somebody's been killed. It was accidental. The manslayer flees to the city of refuge, but who's going to... Now he's locked up basically in the city of refuge. He can never leave until the high priest dies, which might not happen in his lifetime. But the high priest's death seems to atone for the manslayer that had to stay in, because he never really paid the price of that accidental murder, right? I mean, you can say he's paying the price by having to remain in the city of refuge the rest of his life, but that's not the same as taking another person's life. The Lord places a high value on each one of us. Amazing. He gave us the spark of life. We can't create it. Nobody can create it. Nobody knows how it happened. I don't think it was a lightning strike in a muddy puddle somewhere in the millions of years in the past. Could have been, but probably not. But the Lord is making provisions for those people that accidentally do something that they didn't mean, but then he still got to pay the price by living out his life possibly, or at least until the death of the high priest in the city of refuge. And it seems as if the high priest himself bears that guilt, bears that burden, bears that iniquity, if you want to say it like that, of the accidental death that the manslayer was confined to the city of refuge for. It was a long sentence. But after
the death of the high priest, the one who committed manslaughter may return to the land of his property. These things shall be a statutory ordinance for you throughout your generations and all your dwelling places.
Okay, the Lord said, don't change these laws. They're going to stay forever. And now look at this. You can't bond out. Now, the Bible doesn't say bond out, but it's kind of the same thing, right? You can't bond out. You can't pay your way out of a city of refuge. Let's read this.
If anyone kills a person, the murderer shall be put to death on the testimony of witnesses. But no person shall be put to death on the testimony of only one witness.
Okay, one witness is not enough to convict you.
Moreover, you shall not accept a ransom for the life of a murderer who is condemned to death, but he must be put to death.
You can't pay your way out of it.
And you shall not accept a ransom for one who has fled to a city of refuge, so that he may return to live in the land before the death of the priest.
And you can't pay your way out of the city of refuge. If you go outside the gate, you're taking your life in your own hands. Watch out for the Goel Hadam, the blood avenger. All right, and here's why the Lord gives all of us, we really still follow these laws, because the blood defiles the land.
So you shall not defile the land in which you live, for blood defiles the land, and no atonement can be made for the land for the blood that is shed on it, except by the blood of the one who shed it.
Now, this brings to mind a story from the Old Testament about a very famous murderer named King David. Remember that? he said, Lord, I would give you sacrifices. In fact, if you read the pastor's devotion today, that's Psalm 51. That's what Psalm 51 is talking about. David said, Lord, if you wanted sacrifices, I have a gajillion I could give you. But there is no sacrifice for murder. How about that? There's no sacrifice for murder. So David said, if you would accept an offering, I would give it. I've got gajillions of offerings I could give. But he said, in my case, it's a broken and a contrite heart that God is asking for. That's the sacrifice of this murder that David committed against one of his mighty men, Uriah, one of his faithful soldiers. He did it to steal the man's wife. But right here, there's no sacrifice. Why? Because the land has been defiled. And there's no other way to make it right except that the murderer is put to death, and then it's equal as best as it can be. It's never going to be exactly equal, but it's as close to being equal as possible. Then the blood avenger will kill the murderer, and then it's done. No more feuding between families and between tribes. You have to leave it there. You have to consider it as equal payment, and that's it. So
you shall not defile the land in which you live, in the midst of which I dwell. For I, the Lord, am dwelling in the midst of the sons of Israel.
the Lord said, I'm living among you. That's why you can't have these unfair acts, these unfair events where somebody is hurt or maimed or loses an eye or a foot or a hand or an arm. And it's not fair. It's not fair. And the Lord said, I'm living among you, and I can't allow you to treat each other unfairly. So the Lord here is trying to right our human relationships. Okay? Now, Moses, and now we're moving on to Deuteronomy. This is where Moses is actually going to command that the cities of refuge be established.
When the Lord your God cuts off the nations whose land the Lord your God is giving you, and you dispossess them and settle in their cities and in their houses, you shall set aside for yourself 3 cities in the midst of your land, which the Lord your God is giving you to possess.
Okay, and?
You shall prepare the roads for yourself, and divide into 3 regions the territory of your land, which the Lord your God will give you as an inheritance, so that anyone who commits manslaughter may flee there.
The Lord said, you've got to make nice roads leading to the cities of refuge. Why? Because the manslayer has to get on his horse and ride, or his donkey, or whatever he's got. He's got to get to that city before the Goel finds him, before the blood avenger catches him. And so the Lord said, let's make it fair. You can't have poor roads headed to your cities of refuge. You've got to make it easy for someone to go there and escape the Goel. All right?
Now this is the case of the one who commits manslaughter, who may flee there and live, when he kills his friend unintentionally, not hating him previously, as when a person goes into the forest with his friend to cut wood, and his hand swings the axe to cut down the tree, and the iron head slips off the handle and strikes his friend so that he dies. He may flee to one of these cities and live.
Yeah, how many times has this happened to you? It could happen. It's an example. All right, so the Lord's making this as an example, okay?
Otherwise, the avenger of
There he
blood
is.
might pursue him in the heat of his anger and overtake him because the way is long and take his life, though he was not sentenced to death, since he has not hated him previously. Therefore I command you, saying, you shall set aside for yourself 3 cities.
Okay, so that's 3 cities, and those are 3 cities of the Levites. I hope I mentioned that. These are all the cities of refuge were also the cities of the Levites, which is what we're studying tonight. All right, now Moses is going to establish 3 more cities of refuge.
And if the Lord your God enlarges your territory,
Which he did.
just as he has sworn to your fathers, and gives you all the land that he promised to give your fathers, if you carefully follow all of his commandment, which I am commanding you today, to love the Lord your God and to walk in his way always, then you shall add 3 more cities for yourself besides these 3.
Okay, and here's some reasons why the Lord wants these cities.
So innocent blood will not be shed in the midst of your land, which the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance, and guilt for bloodshed will not be on you.
So there it is right there, so that there's no innocent bloodshed, and so that there is no guilt for bloodshed. That's why the Lord is making these provisions for his people to work out their own personal problems with other people. Other people, right? Yeah. All right, so here's the reason. Continuing on in Deuteronomy 19, the reason for the blood avenger, the avenger of blood.
But if there is a person who hates his neighbor and waits in ambush for him and rises up against him and strikes him so that he dies and he flees to one of these cities, then the elders of his city shall send men and take him from there and hand him over to the avenger of blood so that he may die.
Oh, you could be captured and held and taken to the blood avenger. So it's not just the blood avenger you've got to worry about. You've got to worry about everybody if you commit manslaughter. Or you say you committed manslaughter, but really you murdered that guy. And you tried to disguise it as manslaughter. Anybody can grab you and take you to the blood avenger.
You shall not pity him, but you shall eliminate the guilt from the bloodshed of the innocent from Israel so that it may go well for you.
So that it may go well with you. The Lord wants it to go well for them. He's on their side. He's for them. Actually, they're on his side, but they're on the same team. And the Lord wants it to go well, but he knows it's not going to be well if you've got all these people mistreating each other and there's no equality. There's no balance. All right? Now, in the book of Joshua, Joshua is actually going to set up the cities. Moses commanded it. Joshua is going to establish them.
Then the Lord spoke to Joshua, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel, saying, Designate the cities of refuge, of which I spoke to you through Moses, so that one who commits manslaughter by killing a person unintentionally, without premeditation, may flee there. And they shall become your refuge from the avenger of blood.
All right, still trying to get away from the Goel. All right?
Then he shall flee to one of these cities, and he shall not stand at the entrance.
Now,
of
why
the
is he
gate.
having to state this again? Because this is the second generation of people. Joshua is with the second generation. Moses was with the generation that came out of Egypt. But these are their children that survived the 40-year wandering in the wilderness. So Joshua is going to restate the rules to these folks.
And he shall stand at the entrance of the gate of the city and state his case in the presence of the elders of that city. And they shall receive him into the city to them and give him a place so that he may remain among them.
All right, you can't just run in there and hide. You've actually got to talk to some authorities and explain what happened, tell them your story, see if they believe you, and then they will let you in to the city of refuge and you'll be protected from the Goel. All right?
Now if the avenger of blood pursues him, then they are not to hand the one who committed manslaughter over to him.
They're to protect him.
Since he struck his neighbor without premeditation and did not hate him previously.
Okay, so this is the responsibility of the people in the city of refuge. They are supposed to protect the manslayer.
And he shall remain in that city until he stands before the congregation for judgment, until the death of the one who is high priest in those days. Then he shall return to his own city and to his own house, to the city from which he fled.
So we've covered this, but he's just restating it. There's going to be a trial. The congregation is going to have to hear the facts. And if they judge that he is in fact eligible for the city of refuge, he'll have to stay there until the high priest dies. And then he can go home. And then he's probably going to be looking over his shoulder, right? You know, there were probably some evil Goels. It kind of sounds evil, doesn't it? Goel. I bet there were some people that took advantage of the law, right? Do people do that? Take advantage of the law? No. So yeah, you're free to go home, but lock the door at night, right? Because beware the Goel. All right? Oh! Looky there. We've already made it to our in-class assignment. The name of this assignment is called Find the Cities of Refuge. So you can take your map right there. And here we are. We're going to find the 6 cities. If you want to mark them, you can. But the first one is going to be Kadesh in Naphtali. And it's in Galilee, which is in the northern side. Do you see that? See Kadesh? Okay, the next one's going to be Shechem. Remember Shechem? That's where the valley between the mountain of blessing and the mountain of cursing were. That's where they did the covenant renewal with Joshua. It's in Ephraim. Got it? And then look at this name, Kiriath Arba. But let's just call it Hebron. Hebron in Judah. Judah's down there on the lower left. It's the big one. Judah's the big tribe, by the way. And then number 4, beyond Jordan, this is going to be on the east side or the right side. Remember, we on the right side. It's Bezer. Bezer in the tribe of Reuben. Got it? Next one is going to be Ramoth. It's up in Gilead in the tribe of Gad. Gad. What a name, huh? Gad. And the last one is Golan in Bashan from the tribe of Manasseh. Does anybody think it's odd that there's a Manasseh on each side of the Jordan River? No? Okay. I thought it's odd. That's a whole other story that we're not covering tonight. But do you see that? And Manasseh's huge, isn't it? It's huge. So the tribes were allotted according to their population. But remember, not all of this land is the same. Some is hilly, some is mountainous, some is fertile for farming. So you can't really look at the map and say, hey, this tribe got slighted or this, it's based on their population and also what is in the land, what the land is like. All right, so there you go. If you found all 6, give yourself 100. Good job. Good job. All right, these
These were the designated cities for all the sons of Israel and for the stranger who resides among them, so that whoever kills a person unintentionally may flee there and not die by the hand of the avenger of blood until he stands before the congregation.
Boy, the Lord really made a big deal out of this, right? There's a lot of verses talking about this subject, but I mean, this is a very emotional topic. Can you imagine somebody coming in and murdering one of your family members? It's very emotional, and emotions get out of hand, and people do things that they might later regret, and the Lord is trying to tamp down these over responses like Levi. That's where we started tonight, right? He overreacted. He didn't have to kill every man in Shechem. It wasn't every man in Shechem that raped his sister. It was one man. But they killed all the men. They went way overboard. Excessive violence. And the Lord said, we're not going to do that anymore. We're not going to have that in my people who I'm living among. All right, so now, Joshua 21, the Levites are going to ask Joshua, give us our cities, man. Come on. Something like that.
Then the heads of fathers' households of the Levites approached Eleazar the priest, Joshua the son of Nun, and the heads of fathers' households of the tribes of the sons of Israel. And they spoke to them at Shiloh in the land of Canaan, saying, the Lord commanded through Moses to give us cities to live in with their pasture lands for our cattle.
Mm-hmm.
So the sons of Israel gave the Levites from their inheritance these cities with their pasture lands in accordance with the command of the Lord.
All right, so then the Levites are going to receive 48 cities. We're not going to cover them. It's a lot. But included in that 48, you already know now that 6 of those were cities of refuge. And here's how they did it. They cast lots. That doesn't seem very spiritual, does it? Casting lots. It's kind of like throwing dice. We don't know exactly what it is, but it's like, why didn't they just go to the Lord? Why didn't they just pray? They're getting away from this, the Lord speaking to Moses and the Lord speaking to Joshua, and now the Lord is going to be speaking through the law. He's not speaking directly through his spokesman. In fact, there's not going to be, after Joshua, there's not going to be a unified leader until many years later. That's where we go into the book of Judges. But these judges were regional. There was nobody that was over all the tribes during this time, right after Joshua died. So they cast lots, and it doesn't seem like a very spiritual way to do it, but that's the way they did it. And I don't know why they couldn't pray and get the answer from the Lord, but it seemed to work out well this way. You know, the Lord doesn't answer every prayer, right? Y'all know that, right? Okay. So the sons of Aaron are going to get 13 cities, and they're going to be in Judah, Simeon, and Benjamin. And Hebron is the name of the city of refuge. Now, so the Levites couldn't just pick any one of these 48 cities to live in. They had to pick one of the cities according to their class. And so the first class is going to be the priests. Aaron and his children are the priests. So the priests, this works out beautifully, are going to live in Judah and Benjamin, which is where Jerusalem is going to be located years later. Do you see that? What a coinkydink that the priests were located right there close to the temple in Jerusalem. But that's going to be years later. but this is where they settled. They settled around that area because the Lord knew that that's where the temple was going to be. So the rest of the Kohathites, remember the three sons of Levi? It was Kohath and Gershom, and that funny one sounds like Ferrari. Merari, right. So these are going to be those divisions. So the priests are sons of Aaron. This son of Levi, the Kohathites, are going to have these cities in Ephraim, Dan, and Manasseh west, and that's going to be Shechem, the city of refuge there. The Gershomites are going to have 13 cities in Issachar, Asher, Naphtali, and Manasseh east. Their two cities of refuge would be Kadesh and Golan. And here we go, Merarites, 12 cities in Reuben, Gad, Zebulun, and they have Bezer and Ramoth as their cities of refuge. Here is your Bible study to go. Check this out. The Lord reversed the curse on Levi and turned his punishment of being scattered in Israel into a blessing for both the Levites and all the tribes. Nice, huh? The Lord can turn our bad situations and our mistakes and even our sins. He can turn it into something beautiful and something good. And Levi started out really rough, but look where his family ended up. They were the special tribe, the special ones that were holy to the Lord. The Levites lived among all the tribes of Israel as spiritual guides, and they represented the Lord's presence. They were his representatives, and they represented the Lord being scattered throughout all the tribes of Israel. Isn't that beautiful? The cities of refuge foreshadow the Messiah, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. We run to him when the going gets tough, right? We run to him. And isn't it nice that he made the road smooth and easy to get to? He's right there with you all the time. Paul said he's right there where you can feel after him. He's right there where you can find him. The Goel in Israel balanced out God's justice as avenger and God's grace as redeemer. It takes both, though, to keep it in balance. The Lord is our Goel. He redeems us from sin, and he paid our ransom. Can you say amen to that? Amen. Thank the Lord for that. And our God of justice is also a God of mercy. Woo! I'm glad to hear that. I'm really glad. He went through a lot of trouble to protect the innocent in Israel. And he went through a lot of trouble to protect us from eternal damnation. So God bless you. That's our Levi to Levites part 3.